Welcome to Daily 5 for Monday, July 31st, 2023. When Peacock first announced that they were making an adaptation of the Sony video game series Twisted Metal, I think most people had the same reaction I did, which was, why and how? Because it didn't seem at first to make any sense to get some kind of adaptation. And I think as time went on and I saw what the idea behind it was and I thought more about it, it actually started to make a lot more sense to me, because the problem with a lot of video game adaptations is that people often get upset over the things that don't translate well from the story and the lore that they enjoyed as a game into an actual series, like Silent Hill or Resident Evil, where those are massively, in some ways, big variances on the games that inspired them, or they're not adherent enough, like the things that they do try to copy, they don't do right. It's more rare when you get something like The Last of Us, which has been almost universally acclaimed as being a really good adaptation of a well-loved video game. So Twisted Metal, though, has almost no story. There really is no lore to it, and the lore that there is inconsistent depending on which game you play. And there's been at least 5 mainline entries, and there's at least 2 or 3 spin-off games, and I don't know that any of them are considered canon at this point. I don't know that there is a canon for Twisted Metal. So really all you have to worry about with that series is, okay, you knew Sweet Tooth had to be in it, which of course they featured him very heavily, so you knew he would appear. And as far as the other characters, I think all you really had to do was give them their correct cars and names and general approaches to how they fight, which this is a somewhat grounded series in a lot of ways. Now, it may change, but right now it's somewhat grounded in reality, so some of those car abilities aren't going to make any sense. Not that everything that happens in the series makes sense, don't get me wrong. It's certainly not it's supposed to be a hardcore, realistic depiction of how people drive cars and use machine guns in them, but it feels somewhat rooted in a physics-based reality. That may change, though. I've already gotten the sense, and I'll get more into this on Friday because I just don't have enough time to cover it all here, but I have a sense that the show is going to veer more into the realm of non-reality. There's just little bits of it, especially towards the end, where I think, okay, they're sowing the seeds that this started off seeming somewhat plausible in a real world, and they're going to get away from that, which I think is a good idea, because otherwise it is just Mad Max with guns. That's really all it would be if they don't start to embellish it in places. But I have to be honest, I had a lot of fun with this series. I mean, I knew that I've never seen Stephanie Beatriz and everything, but I've read good things about her work. Anthony Mackie, of course, I'm familiar with because he's been in enough stuff at this point. And the reviews all mentioned that they were good. So I knew that the leads were solid. I just didn't know what the world was going to look like. I didn't know how they were going to flesh out, again, a game series that really doesn't have much of a story. There's certainly, of course, the famous FMV endings from the first one. Twisted Metal Black had some storyline, but even Sweet Tooth. If you look at Twisted Metal Black, which I think is the last game considered to be canon, if it's even considered to be that, his story really is just a snippet of his present. It's really not much of anything besides stereotypical homicidal clown with a little bit of a curse thrown in there. And so I thought, okay, is this all we're going to get in the show? Is he just going to come across as Hannibal Lecter wearing a clown mask? Because, frankly, that's pretty boring. And I had read that he's in a lot of I had read before I watched it that he was in it quite a bit. So I thought, I don't know that I'm not going to get bored of that really fast, but I'm happy to say they didn't do that with him. Sweet Tooth is a really interesting character, at least I think so. And I think the whole show manages to add some world building and lore to a series that really had almost none and makes it largely work. I'm not going to tell you that's some kind of secret masterpiece. It is still somewhat disposable entertainment. But if I had told you before I watched it that I thought that I was going to really like Twisted Metal, I probably would have been lying. I went in and I was hoping to kind of just get a little bit of entertainment out of it, because I knew it was pretty short. They're only 30-minute episodes. There's only 10, so you're talking about 5 hours top to bottom, so not very long in terms of a series. So I thought, okay, this will probably be okay. And I'll say if you really love the games, you'll want to watch it, but maybe nobody else. But at this point, I would recommend it to almost anybody who just wants a fun series. You're not going to come out of it with some kind of great emotional response. There aren't serious, dramatic themes. It's not over the top. There are limits to the budget. You can see that the cars are CG sometimes. But it's also just a genuinely fun series that seems to be having fun with what is an absurd premise. And honestly, that's enough for me. If it gets a second season, I'll be delighted. I'm not expecting it to because I liked it and it has a cliffhanger, so I'm guessing it'll get canceled, which is a shame because I think it has potential, depending on what they would do in a second season. So if it does, I'll be curious where it goes. But overall, if you've been on the fence, Twisted Metal is a fun series. It's not necessarily one that will last forever with you, but it's a good time. Later.